The package makes a small crackling sound when opened. The idea was simple: eat just a few. While replying to messages on her cell phone, a hand slips into the package almost without the other person noticing. One snack, then another. The conversation continues. The television remains on. Several minutes pass. When she finally looks down, only the metallic bottom of the package remains. The first reaction is usually always the same. How did I manage to eat all this without realizing it? Then comes the guilt. I have no willpower. I need to learn to control myself. But what if that explanation is incomplete? What if part of this difficulty didn't originate within you? What if it was carefully constructed over decades? This may be one of the most important stories in modern eating. For almost the entire existence of the human species, finding food required time, effort, and often luck. The organism evolved to make the most of energy-rich foods whenever they appeared, because no one knew when the next meal would be. Today, the reality is exactly the opposite. Food has never been so readily available. And, curiously, it has never been so different from the food that shaped our evolution. In recent decades, a new type of food has come to dominate supermarkets, fast food restaurants, vending machines, and delivery apps. They are colorful, convenient, cheap. They last for months on the shelves, and they seem to awaken an almost irresistible urge to keep eating. We are talking about ultra-processed foods, but are they just modern versions of traditional food? Or is there something much more sophisticated happening behind each package? Does the difficulty in stopping eating stem solely from a lack of discipline? Or were these products developed to directly engage with the oldest mechanisms of the human brain? Answering this question requires an investigation that goes far beyond nutrition. We will explore the history of the food industry, understand how science discovered the brain's reward mechanisms, and reveal how engineering, marketing, and human behavior have converged to create an unprecedented food environment. At the end of this journey, you may discover that the biggest secret of ultra-processed foods is not in the ingredients printed on the label. It's in how they were designed to influence our choices without us even realizing it. And when all the pieces of this story fall into place, it will become clear that understanding this system is not about fearing food. It's about recovering something many believe they have lost: the ability to consciously decide what truly deserves a place on your plate. Imagine entering a supermarket at the beginning of the 20th century. You would probably find fresh meats, fruits, vegetables, grains, flour, milk, and few packaged products. Most food needed to be prepared at home. Cooking was part of the daily routine, not by choice, but out of necessity. Today, just walking through the aisles of any supermarket reveals a completely different reality. Hundreds of colorful packages compete for attention. Snacks, filled cookies, soft drinks, breakfast cereals, frozen meals, cereal bars, ready-made desserts, instant sauces, and a myriad of products that our great-grandparents wouldn't even recognize as food. This transformation happened in just over a century, and it began with good intentions. During the Industrial Revolution, one of the biggest challenges was feeding rapidly growing urban populations. Cities expanded, people left the countryside, and the time dedicated to preparing meals decreased. It was necessary to find ways to produce food on a large scale, preserve it for longer, and transport it over long distances. It was in this context that extraordinary advances emerged. Canning techniques allowed food to be stored for months. Pasteurization reduced the risk of milk-borne diseases. Refrigeration revolutionized the transport of meat and dairy products. Later, freezing further expanded the possibilities. These innovations saved lives, reduced waste, and made food more accessible. But the story didn't stop there. As technology advanced, the industry realized it could do more than just preserve food. It could transform it. Initially, the changes were relatively simple: adding sugar to increase shelf life, using salt to improve preservation, and incorporating vegetable oils to alter the texture. But over the decades, entire laboratories began studying a new question. What makes a person want to buy the same food repeatedly? This question completely changed the food industry. Food engineers, chemists, nutritionists, sensory experts, and marketing professionals began working together. The goal was no longer just to manufacture food, it was to create an experience that was practical, inexpensive, shelf-stable, and above all, extremely enjoyable. This is how many of the foods we now call ultra-processed were born. They are not simply foods that have undergone some processing. After all, grinding wheat to make flour, pasteurizing milk, or freezing vegetables are also forms of processing. The difference with ultra-processed foods lies in their formulation. These products are created from refined ingredients, food extracts, oils, modified starches, added sugars, emulsifiers, flavorings, colorings, stabilizers, and various additives that would hardly be used in a home kitchen. In many cases, the original food almost disappears. The end result is a carefully planned industrial formulation. And there's a reason for that. By combining specific ingredients in precise proportions, it's possible to control virtually the entire consumer experience. The exact crispness of a snack, the sound produced on the first bite, the creaminess of a filling, the speed at which the food melts in the mouth, the aroma released as soon as the packaging is opened. None of this happens by chance. Every detail can be tested hundreds of times before a product reaches the shelves. Meanwhile, another phenomenon was transforming society. The massive entry of women into the workforce, accelerated urbanization, and increased working hours reduced the time available for cooking. Ready-made foods came to represent convenience. Preparing a complete meal required time. Opening a package took only a few seconds. Convenience became a huge competitive advantage, and advertising did the rest. For decades, commercials associated these products with happiness, modernity, fun, and success. Perfect families gathered around the table, children smiling while having breakfast. Athletes consuming processed drinks. Special moments always accompanied by some packaged product. The message was clear, even when never explicitly stated. These foods were part of a better life. Over time, they ceased to be the exception. They came to occupy the center of the diet. Today, in many countries, a significant portion of the calories consumed by the population already comes from ultra-processed foods. This represents a historical shift. For millions of years, humans evolved consuming minimally processed foods. In just a few decades, we began to ingest formulations that evolution never encountered. But there is an even more fascinating detail. These products were not only developed to last longer or cost less, they were also designed to be incredibly enjoyable to eat, and it is precisely here that the story ceases to be merely industrial and begins to involve one of the most complex organs in the human body, the brain. Because to understand why it's so difficult to stop after the first snack, the first cookie, or the first sip of soda, we need to discover how these foods interact with the reward mechanisms that have helped our species survive for thousands of years. It is at this point that science begins to reveal discoveries that few people know about. There's a question that seems simple. What exactly makes a food ultra-processed? Many people automatically answer, it's a food full of preservatives. But this definition is far from explaining the problem. After all, freezing vegetables, pasteurizing milk, or producing artisanal bread also involves processing. That doesn't mean these foods belong to the same category. It was precisely to avoid this confusion that Brazilian researchers developed the NOVA classification, now used by scientists and health organizations in several countries. It divides foods into 4 large groups. The first includes unprocessed or minimally processed foods, such as fruits, vegetables, eggs, rice, beans, meats, milk, and nuts. The second includes culinary ingredients, such as olive oil, butter, sugar, and salt, used to prepare meals. The third group includes processed foods, such as cheeses, traditional breads, and canned vegetables. The fourth group consists of ultra-processed foods, and this is where the story changes completely. Ultra-processed foods are not simply modified foods, they are industrial formulations. Often, they are composed of ingredients that would hardly be part of any family's kitchen. Modified starches, isolated proteins, refined oils, flavorings, emulsifiers, thickeners, colorings, flavor enhancers, and various other technological additives. The goal is not just preservation, it's to create an experience, an extremely pleasant experience. This is where a concept little known outside the food industry comes in. Hyperpalatability. Imagine a piano. Each key represents a different stimulus. One corresponds to sweet, another to salty, another to fat, another to aroma, another to texture, another to temperature. When these elements appear in a balanced way in a natural food, our brain receives a pleasant experience. But ultra-processed foods do something different. They press several of these keys at the same time. Lots of salt, sugar in just the right amount, enough fat to increase creaminess, intensified aromas, textures that alternate between crunchiness and softness, everything carefully adjusted to generate an extremely pleasurable sensory experience. This balance doesn't happen by chance. There's a well-known concept in food science called the bliss point, or point of maximum satisfaction. The term was popularized by American researcher Howard Moskowitz, who demonstrated that small changes in the amounts of sugar, salt, and fat can profoundly modify consumer preferences. The idea isn't to make a food as sweet as possible, nor as salty, nor as fatty. It's to find the combination that generates the greatest pleasure for the greatest number of people. In other words, there's a kind of ideal zone of flavor, and much of the industry has spent decades learning how to find it. But there's an even more surprising detail. It's not just the flavor that matters. Texture plays a huge role. Think of a corn chip. It makes a characteristic noise when bitten. Then, it practically disappears in the mouth. Scientists call this vanishing caloric density. Although the food contains calories, its structure dissolves quickly during chewing. The brain receives fewer physical cues about the amount ingested. The feeling of eating a lot may be less than the actual amount consumed. This is one of the reasons why some people finish an entire package almost without realizing it. Another little discussed aspect is speed. Most ultra-processed foods require little chewing. They are easy to eat. They don't have enough fiber to slow down consumption. They can often be eaten while driving, watching television, working, or using a cell phone. When our attention is divided, the brain registers fewer details of the meal. This facilitates so-called automatic consumption. It's that moment when the hand keeps reaching for another handful before we even realize it. And there is also the combination of convenience and availability. For practically all of human history, obtaining energy-rich foods required effort. Today, you just have to reach out. A package can be opened in seconds. There is no preparation. There is no waiting. There is no need to cook. Immediate access reduces an important barrier that, for thousands of years, naturally limited consumption. But perhaps the most invisible aspect lies in how these foods occupy space in our daily lives. They're at the supermarket checkout, in vending machines, at gas stations, at airports, in schools, in offices, in delivery apps, in advertisements, on social media. The more frequently we are exposed to a food, the greater our familiarity with it tends to be. And what becomes familiar usually seems normal. That's exactly what happened with ultra-processed foods. They ceased to be the exception. They came to represent a significant portion of the calories consumed by millions of people. All this may give the impression that we are completely manipulated. But the reality is more complex. The human brain is not a passive machine. It possesses sophisticated mechanisms for decision-making, self-control, and learning. At the same time, these mechanisms coexist with very old systems, shaped to respond quickly to energy-rich foods. It is precisely in this interaction between biology and environment that science has found some of the most fascinating discoveries of recent decades. What happens inside the brain when we see a bag of chips? Why can the anticipation of eating be as pleasurable as the food itself? And do ultra-processed foods really cause addiction, as so many people claim? The answers require separating myths, exaggerations, and evidence, and that's exactly what we'll do in the next chapter. Imagine you're walking through a supermarket. Your shopping list is short. You only went in to buy bread, milk, and fruit. Then, as you turn down an aisle, something catches your eye. A colorful package, a familiar logo, the sound of an advertisement coming from a television. Suddenly, you feel the urge to buy a food that wasn't even on your list. What happened? For a long time, it was believed that eating was just a response to hunger. Today, we know that the story is much more complex. Our brain doesn't just respond to the body's needs, it also responds to expectations, memories, habits, and the environment. That's why the smell of popcorn can trigger hunger even right after a meal, or why a pizza advertisement can seem irresistible, even when your stomach is full. Much of this process involves a set of structures known as the reward system. Its role is simple and essential: to help the body repeat behaviors that, throughout evolution, have increased the chances of survival. Eating, drinking water, sleeping, creating social bonds. All of this activates, at different levels, brain circuits related to motivation and learning. Among the substances involved in this process is dopamine. It is often simply called the pleasure molecule, but this definition is not entirely correct. Researchers today understand that dopamine is much more related to motivation, learning, and the anticipation of reward than to pleasure itself. In other words, it helps the brain answer the question, is it worth repeating this behavior? If an experience was positive, the brain learns and tries to repeat it in the future. This mechanism has been essential for millions of years. Finding ripe fruit, discovering a water source, capturing prey. All of this needed to be remembered. The problem arises when this system encounters an environment completely different from the one for which it evolved. Ultra-processed foods offer an extremely intense combination of stimuli: high flavor, low effort, high availability, quick consumption, immediate results. This doesn't mean they hijack the brain in the same way as drugs of abuse, as is sometimes claimed on social media. Although some studies find similarities in certain reward mechanisms, most researchers consider this comparison an oversimplification. There are important differences. Substances like cocaine and nicotine act directly on specific neurochemical systems, producing much more intense changes. Food, on the other hand, is necessary for survival. The challenge for science is to understand how certain dietary patterns can favor overconsumption without reducing this discussion to inaccurate comparisons. Current consensus points to something more interesting. Ultra-processed foods seem to facilitate overconsumption because they combine several characteristics at the same time. They tend to have high energy density. They are easy to chew. They require little time to consume. They generate great sensory pleasure. And, in many cases, they promote less satiety than meals composed of minimally processed foods. One of the most influential studies on this topic was conducted by researcher Kevin Hall of the National Institutes of Health in the United States. In this study, volunteers spent periods consuming a diet rich in ultra-processed foods, and at another time, a diet composed mainly of minimally processed foods. Both diets were designed to offer similar amounts of calories, fats, proteins, carbohydrates, fiber, and sodium. But there was an important difference. Participants could eat as much as they wanted, the result was striking. When they consumed ultra-processed foods, they ingested, on average, hundreds of more calories per day and gained weight. When they received minimally processed foods, energy intake decreased spontaneously and weight tended to fall. This did not happen because someone prohibited a particular food. It happened because the dietary pattern itself influenced the amount consumed. Another important discovery involves speed. The faster a meal is eaten, the less time the body has to activate satiety signals. Hormones produced in the gut need a few minutes to inform the brain that enough energy has already been consumed. If the meal ends before these signals are fully perceived, it becomes easier to overeat. Ultra-processed foods often favor exactly this scenario. They are soft, crunchy, convenient. They can be consumed almost without interruption. There is also a psychological aspect: habits. A large part of our food choices happen automatically. Popcorn during the movie, chocolate after lunch, soda with Friday's pizza, cookies during the online meeting. Over time, the brain begins to associate certain situations with certain foods. We are not always hungry. Sometimes we are just responding to a learned habit. This learning is extremely efficient. The more times a behavior is repeated, the less conscious effort it requires. That's why changing your diet can seem so difficult. We are not just changing a menu. We are modifying behavioral circuits built up over years. But there is good news. The same brain that learns habits can also learn new ones. Thanks to a characteristic called neuroplasticity, brain connections continuously change in response to experiences. This means that food preferences can transform. The desire for certain products can decrease. New routines can be built. None of this happens instantaneously, but it does happen. Perhaps this is the most important discovery of all. The difficulty in reducing the consumption of ultra-processed foods does not mean a lack of character, laziness, or absence of discipline. It reflects the interaction between a brain shaped by evolution and a modern environment carefully designed to stimulate constant consumption. And when we understand this, a new question naturally arises. If the environment exerts so much influence on our choices, does it make sense to continue blaming only the individual? Or should we also look at the world we are building around us? It is precisely this reflection that leads us to the next chapter. You wake up early. Still sleepy, you grab your cell phone before even getting out of bed. As you scroll, ads for specialty coffees, hamburgers, pizzas, chocolates, and ready-made snacks appear. You don't even realize it, but your first contact with food of the day happens even before breakfast. Leaving home, a bakery displays brightly lit windows. On the way to work, billboards advertise promotional combos. At the office, someone brings a box of sweets to celebrate a birthday. In the afternoon, an app sends a notification: free delivery for a limited time. At night, tiredness wins. Cooking seems to require too much energy. In a few taps, a meal arrives at the door. None of these situations seem extraordinary. The problem is that they happen every day. And it is precisely this repetition that makes the modern food environment so powerful. For much of human history, eating depended mainly on hunger. Today, we often eat because we have been reminded to eat. A smell, an advertisement, a promotion, an eye-catching package, a meeting, an emotion. The environment is full of triggers. Scientists call these environmental cues. They are stimuli that activate behaviors almost automatically, often without us realizing it. Think of a movie theater. How many people feel the urge to buy popcorn just by entering the room, even after having just finished dinner, or on a car trip? Why do so many people buy snacks at gas stations, even when they're not really hungry? These behaviors are learned. The brain creates associations between places, times, and foods. Over time, simply encountering that situation is enough to trigger the craving. Another important factor is stress. When we face tight deadlines, financial problems, family conflicts, or overwork, our bodies release hormones like cortisol, which can influence appetite in some people. Not everyone reacts the same way. Some lose their appetite. Others start looking for highly palatable foods, not because the body specifically needs a package of cookies, but because foods high in sugar, fat, and salt can provide an immediate feeling of comfort. This relief, however, is usually fleeting. The source of stress remains, and when this strategy is repeated frequently, the brain learns to associate difficult emotions with the consumption of these foods. Another frequently ignored element is sleep. Sleeping too little doesn't just mean waking up tired. Sleep deprivation alters hormones related to hunger and satiety, such as ghrelin and leptin, and increases the tendency to seek out more energy-dense and highly palatable foods. In other words, after a bad night's sleep, resisting that dessert can become more difficult not due to a lack of discipline, but because the body itself is functioning differently. There is also the issue of portion sizes. Observe how they have changed in recent decades. Larger cups, family-sized packages, giant combos, unlimited refills. When the available quantity increases, we tend to consume more, often without realizing it. Research in eating behavior shows that people frequently use external cues, such as the size of the packaging or the amount served, to decide how much to eat, and not just internal hunger and satiety signals. Another curious detail is the speed of modern life. Preparing a meal requires planning. Buying ingredients, washing, cutting, cooking, waiting. An ultra-processed food, on the other hand, can be ready in seconds. When we are tired or overwhelmed, the brain tends to conserve effort. This phenomenon is known as cognitive economy. Whenever possible, we choose the path that requires the least mental energy. Therefore, the decision to consume an ultra-processed food is often not rational, it's practical. Convenience wins, and there's an aspect that few people realize. Food has also become entertainment. Social media displays exaggerated recipes, food challenges, and videos that highlight the sound of crunching, melting cheese, or slowly dripping chocolate. This content awakens desire, even without the aroma or taste being present. The brain responds only to expectation. It's a demonstration of how vision, memory, and emotion participate in eating. Given all this, blaming the individual exclusively seems to oversimplify the issue. This doesn't mean removing personal responsibility. Every choice remains important. But choices happen within a context, and this context profoundly influences our behavior. The good news is that the environment that favors consumption can also be reorganized to favor more conscious choices. Small changes, such as leaving fruits visible, avoiding buying large quantities of ultra-processed foods, or planning meals in advance, can reduce the need to rely solely on willpower. Because willpower is a limited resource, it fluctuates with fatigue, stress, sleep, and emotions. A well-organized environment, on the other hand, works in your favor every day. And perhaps that's precisely the most important shift in perspective. Instead of constantly fighting against your own brain, we can create conditions so that the best choices become the easiest. In the next and final major step of this investigation, we will see how to transform this knowledge into practical, sustainable, and evidence-based strategies, without radical diets, without guilt, and without giving up the pleasure of eating. After learning the history of ultra-processed foods, understanding how they are formulated, and discovering why the brain responds so intensely to this type of food, an inevitable question arises. What to do now? The answer may surprise you. It doesn't begin in the kitchen, nor in the supermarket, much less with a fad diet. It begins with a change in perspective. For years, many people believed that eating better depended only on having more willpower. But behavioral science shows that relying exclusively on discipline is like trying to row against a current every day. It's possible, but it's extremely exhausting. Instead, researchers have shown that small changes in the environment often produce much more consistent results than grand promises of transformation. The most powerful rule: make the healthy choice the easiest choice. Think about your home. When you feel hungry, what is the first food your eyes find? If, upon opening a cupboard, there are several packages of cookies, chips, and chocolates within easy reach, while fruits are hidden in the refrigerator drawer, the decision is already biased. Our brain tends to choose what requires less effort. Therefore, a simple strategy can make a difference. Leave washed fruits visible. Keep nuts or other nutritious snacks in easily accessible places. Avoid stocking large quantities of ultra-processed foods, just in case. Not because they are forbidden, but because what is available tends to be consumed. Planning overcomes impulses. A large part of food choices happen when we are tired, and tiredness rarely combines with good decisions. Planning some meals of the week reduces the need to improvise. This doesn't mean preparing everything in advance. Just have basic ingredients available: rice, beans, eggs, vegetables, fruits, natural yogurt. These foods allow you to put together quick meals without relying exclusively on ready-made products. Learn to recognize your triggers. Not all hunger is physical. Sometimes, the craving for a food appears after a stressful meeting, during a series, while working, while driving, or always at the same time in the afternoon. Observing these patterns is a powerful exercise. Ask yourself, am I hungry or just following a habit? This pause of a few seconds can interrupt an automatic behavior, not to prevent you from eating, but to allow the decision to be conscious. Don't try to change everything at once. This is one of the biggest mistakes people make when deciding to improve their diet. On Monday, they eliminate sugar, soda, bread, pasta, desserts, and all their favorite foods. On Friday, the plan falls apart. Science shows that gradual changes are more likely to become permanent. Replace a sugary drink with water a few days a week. Include an extra piece of fruit each day. Try preparing an additional homemade meal. Small victories strengthen confidence. Read less promises and more ingredients. Packaging is designed to grab attention. Source of vitamins: whole grain, fit, zero fat. These messages highlight a positive characteristic, but don't tell the whole story. Before deciding, also look at the ingredient list. The shorter and more familiar it is, the closer the food will generally be to its original form. This doesn't mean that every product with many ingredients is automatically bad, but learning to interpret labels helps you make more conscious choices. Pleasure remains part of eating. Perhaps this is the most important idea of all. Eating well doesn't mean turning every meal into an obligation. Food also represents culture, celebration, memories, togetherness. Completely eliminating foods you enjoy can make any strategy unsustainable. Balance usually works better than prohibition. A dessert shared with family, a pizza with friends, a slice of cake at a celebration. These moments are part of life. What truly influences health is what happens most days, not the exceptions. Reclaim your relationship with food. There's a habit that modern life has almost eliminated: mindful eating. Many meals happen in front of the television, computer, or cell phone. When we multitask, we perceive flavors less, chew faster, and have more difficulty identifying satiety signals. Try, whenever possible, to dedicate a few minutes exclusively to your meal. Smell the aromas, observe the texture, chew slowly. This simple practice can increase satisfaction and reduce automatic eating. True food freedom. Throughout this documentary, you may have expected to find a great secret, a formula capable of eliminating the urge to eat ultra-processed foods. But science points in another direction. True freedom isn't about never feeling cravings. It's about understanding why those cravings arise. When we understand how the environment influences our choices, we stop seeing each difficulty as a personal failure and begin to build intelligent strategies to live better within the world we actually live in. Because the goal was never to win a war against food. The goal is to restore food to its rightful place, nourishing the body, providing pleasure, and being part of a balanced life. without silently controlling our choices. Perhaps the biggest surprise of this investigation is realizing that the history of ultra-processed foods has never been just about food. It's about human behavior, about technology, about economics, about science, and above all, about how the environment can shape our decisions without us even realizing it. When we look at a bag of chips or a filled cookie, it's easy to imagine we're just looking at food. But now, we know there's much more behind that packaging. Decades of research in food engineering, studies on texture, aroma, crispness, and flavor, analyses of consumer behavior, marketing strategies. All of this converged to create extremely convenient, pleasant, and easy-to-consume products. This doesn't mean there's a conspiracy or that someone created food with the intention of harming people. The reality is more complex. Companies compete for consumer preference. Naturally, they seek to develop products that are tasty, convenient, and commercially successful. At the same time, science shows that frequent consumption of ultra-processed foods, especially when they replace meals based on minimally processed foods, is associated with worse health outcomes at the population level. It is precisely in this balance that we must remain. Neither demonize nor ignore. Understand, because understanding changes everything. Throughout this documentary, we have seen that our brains have evolved to value energy-rich foods. We have discovered that reward mechanisms are essential for survival, but can respond intensely in an environment where highly palatable products are available at all times. We also understand that eating habits do not arise solely from hunger. They are influenced by stress, sleep, advertising, emotions, memories, and convenience. This means that changing one's diet does not depend solely on discipline. It depends on creating an environment that favors good choices. Before concluding, it is worth summarizing the 5 major lessons of this investigation. The first, ultra-processed foods are not just modified foods. They are industrial formulations developed to offer convenience, long shelf life, and an extremely pleasant sensory experience. Second, wanting to continue eating certain foods is not in itself a sign of weakness. It is the result of the interaction between human biology and a food environment carefully constructed over decades. Third, the brain is capable of learning habits, but it is also capable of transforming them. Neuroplasticity reminds us that food preferences can change over time. Fourth, small sustainable changes often produce much greater effects than radical diets that last only a few weeks. And fifth, the goal is not to live in fear of ultra-processed foods, but to prevent them from occupying the space that should belong most of the time to minimally processed foods. Perhaps this is the biggest difference between guilt and knowledge. Guilt makes one believe that everything depends only on willpower. Knowledge shows that there are biological, psychological, and environmental factors influencing our choices, and that by understanding them, we can build much smarter strategies. Ultimately, regaining control of your diet doesn't mean never eating a snack, chocolate, or pizza again. It means making those choices conscious, not automatic. It means deciding when to eat, how much to eat, and why. Because when the decision returns to your hands, food stops controlling your routine and begins to fulfill its true role again. Nourishing the body, providing pleasure, and being part of a balanced life. If this documentary made you see ultra-processed foods in a different light, tell us in the comments. What discovery caught your attention the most? Your experience can help others who are also trying to better understand their relationship with food. If you believe this content can contribute to a more conscious conversation about health, share this video with friends and family. Often, a single piece of evidence-based information is enough to change how someone makes their daily choices. And if you enjoy documentaries that combine history, science, and food without sensationalism, please like and subscribe to the channel. In each new episode, we investigate a different topic to separate myths from facts and show how small decisions can have big impacts throughout life. In the next documentary, we will investigate another silent character in modern food: diet and zero-calorie sodas. Do they really help with weight control? How do sweeteners interact with the brain, taste buds, and metabolism? And why does this topic still generate so much controversy in science? This is a story that also deserves to be told. Thank you for following this investigation to the end.